Others broke ranks and fled. Some would call those who ran cowards, but Imgar didn't condemn them so. They'd been led into this war with lies. Why should they be expected to throw themselves on Vokkan swords and spears? Of course, there were those who would likewise call Imgar a coward, a traitor even, for what he was about to do. The hawk didn't care. History would judge him with its long gaze, but in the present he cared only for the lives and futures of his followers. Imgar had never thought of himself as a warrior, much less a leader of warriors, but he had also never let a weapon nor a piece of armor leave his shop without thoroughly testing it himself. Over the years, he'd become proficient in the use of daggers, swords, and shields, and more than proficient with war axes. His smithy sat at the center of town and had become a gathering point of friends and neighbors. Imgar had gained a reputation for shrewd and fair judgment. Disputes were brought to him. In the beginning, they were petitioners from his own village or nearby homesteads. Over time, his reputation drew visitors from across the Fieri Highlands, and even the lowlands too. When the call came from King Dentroth to form a militia in Fieri, Imgar was named their commander. He accepted the position humbly, but not reluctantly, because he went to war expecting the fall of the kingdom. He trusted no one else to do what was necessary to prevent the slaughter of his people. At a signal from Imgar, his gathered warriors melted back down the hillside. This open plain would be a sea of slaughter. The only place to meet the Vokkans and survive would be rugged terrain, where numbers couldn't overwhelm with sheer force. Even there, the hawk knew victory wasn't possible. Only resistance. Only survival. But that was enough. For now. Chapter 1. As far as lost brawls went, Teth's scuffle with the Vokkan soldiers could have been worse. Yes, his left eye was swollen shut, but he still had all his teeth. His body was a map of mottled blues and purples, but none of his bones were broken. All in all, Teth had come out of the fight in fairly decent shape. Except for the fact that he was now a prisoner. No matter how he tried to spin that outcome, which he could usually do to make the best out of bad situations, he couldn't find an upside to his capture. Throughout the journey from the Great Market to Five Rivers, Teth looked for any opportunity to escape. None came. He had presumed his time on the road with the soldiers would be rife with regular patrols and patterns that he could exploit. They would make camp for the night. There would be changes in the guard. Distractions would draw the soldiers' attention from him. He searched for anything that would give him the chance to flee his captors. But by what must be some of the Vokkan wizard's magic, the guards had preternatural constitutions. They didn't sleep. They rode at a relentless pace, stopping only briefly to change horses. During these short breaks, Teth was always accompanied by 2 guards, and his shackles were never removed. The brutal slog of the journey wore him down, but something more nagged at his mind and mood as they travelled north. The sight of the Vokkan soldiers surrounding him, the flapping of their tabards in the wind, the ching of their armour as their mounts trotted over the dusty road. It was all familiar, but that was impossible. Teth had never been in Vokkan captivity before, so why did his gut churn in a way it never had when he'd found himself in a tight spot? What were these flickers in his mind's eye, like shadows darting in and out, trying to draw his attention? A part of him wanted to focus on the strange feelings and puzzle them out, but another instinct warned him to turn away from the invasive thoughts, as if there was something monstrous crouching behind those shadows. At the beginning of the journey, Teth had been hopeful he'd only be in the Vokkans' clutches a short while. A day, maybe 2. But by the time the soldiers marched him down a long hallway in the Temple of Vokk, he wondered if he would even survive the next handful of hours.